Well, let's talk more about South Africa's economy with a man who deals directly with its economy and its people. Ben Kruger joining us from Johannesburg. He's the co-chief executive of Standard Bank there. Ben, it looks like you've put out some pretty good profit numbers for the past year. You've also paid a dividend to your shareholders, so that's great. I'm interested to know how you managed to do that in what is definitely a weakening economy.
Thank you, Kamal. Yes, indeed it is. South Africa has been somewhat challenged in the last year, as you rightly put it. I think the star of the show for us have been our businesses in the 20 countries in Africa where we operate from. We have seen pretty good growth in East Africa, West Africa, and even the Southern African cluster of countries around South Africa for the year. You know, many of these economies are growing in rates of excess of 5% at this point in time.
So if it is the rest of Africa that's driving your business at the moment, are you worried or are you concerned about your home business in South Africa and how it's been impacted by the slowdown?
No, if we look at South Africa at the macro level, we are not that concerned. Clearly, we have lived and we call this home, and so we understand the economy quite well. On the negative side, electricity has been a constraint in the country, and we would calculate that that's at least a 1% negative impact on GDP, which in a country with low growth and high unemployment clearly is a concern. In addition to that, South Africa tended to be a very high energy demanding economy, and there's a lot of work being done to try and shift that away to a more balanced energy type consuming economy. On the positive side, the price of oil has had a very big positive impact on South Africa, and we calculate that to be between 1 and 1.5% positive adjustment to GDP. And then just looking at the way people readjust their lives and deal with electricity, I think with a very clear scheduled program of when there will be terminations of electricity in certain areas, people have rearranged their lives and have learned to cope with that. I think if it goes to a higher stage of disruption, that clearly will be more negative. But it is, on balance, it still is negative. It's not great for the economy, but it's not as debilitating as we've seen. Clearly, our concern is actually much wider than that. From a country perspective, we really need to get structurally in a position where we can grow at in excess of 4% if we want to make a dent in unemployment and poverty in a country in any meaningful way. And that remains a challenge for the government, for us in business, and I think for every South African to try and get our productivity up and operate at that level.
I just wonder, Ben, and not to go on too much about the blackout situation, but you talked about how people have adjusted their lives accordingly because of these the blackouts. How does your business adjust accordingly? You've got ATMs, branches. Access to money is fundamental.
Absolutely right, and we are fairly fortunate in that we are a fairly low energy consuming type company, and many of our buildings have converted to higher status of green buildings in our head offices and so forth. But we do have generators in all of our branches, and clearly there's a cost associated with that. It is a big cost for us. It is more complicated for higher energy consuming type industries such as the mining industries or smelters or people like that, and it is very difficult. Even though when I was talking to some retailers the other day, some of the retailers now have generators in all of their outlets, even if they're in big shopping malls. And the complication for them is even if they open, when people arrive at a mall or they see the mall slightly dark, they actually change their patterns and they come back when there's no scheduled blackout. And so even if you do have the capacity to deal with it, it is complicated. So we do tend to focus on that, but it is very, very demanding on systems infrastructure, network infrastructure, all of these things with systems booting up and down. For many companies that don't have the same resilience built into their systems, it is very complicated.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating, actually. Can I move on and sort of pick your economic brain now? I want to get your feeling about the state of the country. There are issues such as debt to GDP ratios rising. We've mentioned in the program debt could be cut to junk status by the ratings agencies. Are you happy that the South African government is doing the right sorts of things to address this, that there is the right kind of spending going on?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and we clearly had the new Minister of Finance present his budget speech last week, and I think he did a really good job of trying to balance the requirements and the demands in the country with what is feasible, and trying to balance the requirements from a capital market point of view for the country and its debt in the medium term. Now, clearly, this is a very complicated balancing act, and you saw him increasing taxes at the highest level somewhat, and then increasing some of the taxes on fuel and so forth, which clearly, with a big reduction in the fuel price, motorists and consumers won't feel the pain as much. They'll just have a slightly lower reduction in the cost of fuel. But in the medium term, I think the big ponderals on the horizon would be the labour situation in South Africa. I think for the big public sector wage negotiations coming up, this is going to be quite a demanding round, and the government is quite focused on curtailing and maintaining their spending within a certain range, and I think the unions seem to be fairly set on pushing that quite higher, and so that is an uncertainty, I think, in a very near term.
Ben Kruger on the state of the South African economy right now. Great talking to you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal.